Very good evening, everyone. Am I audible to everyone?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Thank you so much. A warm welcome and very good evening to our organizers, all delegates, and our respected resource person, Dr. Kranthi sir. It is with my great pleasure that I introduce our distinguished resource person for today's online session, Dr. Kranthi Kumar Garkapati sir, an accomplished associate professor in the Department of Physiology at SRMS Institute of Medical Sciences, Bareilly, Uttar Pradesh. Sir holds a master degree in medical physiology from GSL Medical College and Hospital, Rajamundry, Andhra Pradesh, under the esteemed Dr. NTR Health University, Vijayawada. He further pursued his academic journey by obtaining a PhD in medical physiology from Santosh Medical College and Hospital, affiliated with Santosh deemed to be University Ghaziabad. With an impressive 12 years of teaching experience, Sir has become a stalwart in the field of physiology. He is dedicated life member of several academic associations, including the Association of Physiologists and Pharmacologists of India, the Association of Physiologists of India, Uttar Pradesh, Uttarakhand Association of Physiologists and Pharmacologists of India, and the Association of MSc Medical Teachers. Sir has actively contributed to the academic community by serving as the finance secretary for various conferences, including the second National Annual Conference of ASSOPI, the 8th Annual Conference of UP-UK EPICON, and the PED OBGYN Fusion 2022, the first annual conference of transfusion medicine at SRMS Bareilly. He has also organized workshops on research protocol writing and thesis writing under Dr. Padam Singh Research and Development Scheme, and organizing committee member of various national and state chapter conferences. In addition to his teaching responsibilities, Sir has completed notable medical education training programs, including the basic course in medical education, curriculum implementation supportive program, and basic course in biomedical research. His exceptional contribution extend to administrative roles, where he has served as the Dean of Student Welfare, a member of Curriculum Committee, and a resource faculty at Curriculum Implementation Supportive Program at Sri Ramurthy Smarak Institute of Medical Sciences, designated at the NMC Regional Center. Sir's scholarly impact is reflected in his impressive portfolio of research publications, with 10 articles published in various national and international journals. His commitment to the advancement of medical education and research is truly commendable, making him an invaluable resource person for today's online session. Please join me welcoming Dr. Kranthi sir, whose wealth of knowledge and experience will undoubtedly enrich our learning experience in this 1 month journey of effective research writing. Please, sir, welcome, sir.
Thank you very much, Amitji. Good evening, all. Is it audible to all?
Yes, yes, audible, sir.
I think I should minimize this. Yeah. Good evening, one and all present here on this online platform of the certificate course. Can I go ahead?
Yes, please, sir. Welcome, sir.
Thank you so much. Yeah. So I thank all the organizing team members for giving me this opportunity to make me to discuss this topic of writing inclusion and exclusion criteria in this platform. And good evening, all participants. Just for a moment, I just wanted to know the participants' background. I think I have seen many of them are from medical, I think.
Yes, sir. Basically, the participants have diversity from background, like from allopath, from Ayurveda, few of from homeopath also, and from different medical colleges and Ayurveda colleges across India, from each state. And the majority are faculties in this program registered for the program, and PhD scholars.
That's wonderful. So let me continue the topic, and I request the participants while we are going ahead at any slide, if you want to interrupt me, it's most welcome for, and you may add a line, because it's not in a teaching and learning, it's an interactive session where we can discuss, because you are in that field and we are in the same field, so that we can discuss and we can contribute much more to the topic even. So today's topic is writing inclusion and exclusion criteria. Seems to be a small topic of the methodology, usually is to say, but it's have a lot of importance. Let's see that. I think one slide is missing here. Me- Yeah. So how it is going to help to us? How this inclusion and exclusion criteria makes this a methodology or a protocol or in a research, how it will helps to us. First aspect is once we choose to make any research, we're going to frame a research question. So once you prepare inclusion and exclusion criteria which are specific to the research question, which makes us to bound to it actually. Otherwise, we may cross the lines or boundaries of it. We don't know that where we are going and to whom we are involving. So many aspects are going to take place. So the inclusion and exclusion criteria makes us to restrict to our specific research question, first aspect. And second thing is which improves the quality of the selection of the subjects in research. Why I'm saying the quality of selection, because once we particularly chosen a particular stream of subjects, a particular cases of one disease or any aspect we are choosing, so that if we make a proper criteria of the selection, so that will make us what exactly we want out of it. That is important. Then which make us a smooth enrollment process of the subjects. Once the criteria are well defined, we doesn't need to see anything. If any subjects are samples which are fulfilling this criteria, our enrollment will be easy and very smooth. Then once if all these are fine, the protocol amendments and violations are very less. Because when we require violations, when our criteria are not properly framed, are not properly fitting it, so when we confuse it ourselves. But once they are made very well, so once the protocol is made and the inclusion and exclusion criteria are fulfilled, are well framed, and which were accepted by the guides or co-guides or institutional ethical committee or review board, then it minimizes the violations later. So that is also the framing of inclusion and exclusion criteria makes us to answer for all ethical considerations also, that whom we are involving, what are the risk factors, everything. So that by framing a very well inclusion and exclusion criteria, that will help us to make all these kind of things. And if anything there, I request the participants to add up even. If you have any ideas about it and to wanted to add. So please, I request the participants also to involve so that we can have a good interactive session and we can share the things. So,
I allowed,
yeah,
I
please.
think, I allowed all participants. If you need to say anything, you can unmute at your end. I allowed everyone.
Yeah, thank you so much. Where we have seen that in the last slide, where these subjects enrollment becomes smooth, and then the quality of selection of the subjects is going to be improved by this, where we can see that a slide simply that, because it's already over that about what is sample and what is population, but a quick revision of it. When an entire set of possible observations, we call it a population, because it's every time it is not possible to take an entire population to be as a study samples. Where if you're going to a particular school, if you go on a third class or fourth class, or to say that an MBBS students of a 150 or 200, if you see, if you're going to check that out of all the students who are more than 6 feet, we can study, then means all population or all the class of MBBS first year are all together who are more than 6 feet can be studied easily, means entire population of it who are more than 6 feet. But it is not possible to do a study which are having a in our city or a district which are all the people which are more than 6 feet of height, so that we choose a small subset of this population that contains the same characteristics that represents the population is called sample, so which is used for statistical testing out of the population. But the whole whatever the um, after the analysis the results which can be applied to the entire population. So the inclusion and exclusion criteria is also called as a selection criteria. These are a set of rules to select the sample that is representative of the population of interest so that the results have a good internal and external validity. Can any one of us make out like what is called this internal and external validity? A small picture is depicting here. Means once you have started taking the samples and you have analyzed it, how these results which comes out have a good internal and external validity. First thing is a internal validity. So out of the selection criteria, we have selected as particular samples and the results were well showing, means those are accurate, means there is a truth in the study, which is called an internal validity. If the same set of results, if we try to apply to the entire population which is intended, means a real life scenario where we are applying the results to the population, so that is external validity. If the lack of accuracy in our results due to any kind of bias, confounding factors or modifying factors, there is no internal validity, so that hence we can't apply it to the entire population. So once if you properly make the inclusion and exclusion criteria, that results have a good internal and external validity if you do it properly. So inclusion criteria. So these are the attributes of subjects that are essential for their selection to participate. So finally, what is this internal and external criteria makes it who to whom that we are involving into the study, to whom that we are not going to involve. That's it, simply to say. So it can be a social demographic characteristics like age, sex, socioeconomic status, whatever. So disease characteristics, a particular type of disease, or the when any stage of disease, or any other variable of interest depending upon the aim and objectives you have chosen for your study. So you are involving all these are attributes of inclusion criteria, and this will help the inclusion of variables that are of the interest of the researcher and community. So why it is so, say at particular times ICMR or some other makes to prefer a particular kind of research projects, to say that at this time it's a cancer, at this time it is going to be do on diabetes, so that it's a interest of the researcher and community what you have chosen. Out of it we are going to include the particular things whatever required on the basis of the interest. If you see that I give an example, okay, if you want to understand, I'm going to change the example here. To assess the autonomic functions, autonomic functions means our heart rate, respiratory rate, and many aspects are going to be affected by the autonomic nervous system. So we are here assessing or studying the autonomic functions of the persons with a type 2 diabetes, which is actually our aim. So in the objectives, what we are doing, we are testing the autonomic functions of the people with a type 2 diabetes. So what should be our inclusion criteria? So means any kind of things that what last slide we have seen, social demographic characters, disease characters, like where to whom that we are including it. So first thing is it you are involving males, females, or any to whom you are involving? If suppose age of onset you are doing it out type 1, that is different, and type 2 again, which age group you wanted to involve here, adults or elderly population. And specifically the disorder obviously that we have chosen is a type 2 diabetes, so we have taken the type 2 diabetes. In that also, if you want to add a particular group whose fasting blood glucose levels are more, or which people that having type 2 diabetes mellitus are uncontrolled, or whose HbA1c is more than 8, means you can specify it based on your aims and objectives. So these can be called the inclusion criteria. So what are the exclusion criteria? These are the qualities about a person or the external factors around them that would go against the goal. Means you have already framed the aims and objectives to whom you're just, adding it, or to whom that you're actually involving into the study. If any external factors around them are just going against your goal of the study, are interfering with it, so those are the exclusion factors. You have to eliminate them. Like a confounding factors or modifying factors, means the confounding factors to say that any factors which are going to associated with both exposure and outcomes, and modifying factors where which are associated with the outcomes. So these confounding and modifying factors at times that you may get it know by review of literature, means by seeing the articles. And variables that decrease the generalizability of the results, we have seen that the many factors, if not eliminated, which is going to decrease the validity of uh, the research, so that we have to eliminate it, we have to make it separate. And variables that can increase the risk of harm in research, because like last we have seen a study of autonomic functions in type 2 diabetes. If any type 2 diabetes patients who are having a retinopathy can't be taken to proceed for the Valsalva manual. So that may cause a damage. So that those risk factors should be excluded. Means along with the type 2 diabetes patients you are involving, but who are having this kind of diseases or anything should be excluded from the study. Where, for example, that to say the same study where exclusion criteria are asthma, because they have to take the deeper inspirations and expirations, so that asthmatic patients it may be affected, so that we are excluding the asthma patients. And smokers and alcoholics, so that because of smoking and alcohol will impact over the autonomic functions. And who are already developed cardiovascular diseases, so already the autonomic functions are compromised in them. And who are on chronic medications, are psychologically affected. So but the other things can also be as an exclusion criteria, where because if you see the autonomic functions which have a both parasympathetic function tests and sympathetic function tests, in which we are studying the effect of heart rate and blood pressure with a standing. So who are unable to stand can also be excluded from the study. Okay, so these can be the exclusion criteria of the study. Please, I request the participants again that you may add up if you have any doubts, we may discuss. You please unmute yourself, and you may continue discussion even. So why do we write these inclusion and exclusion criteria? So these criteria will improve the reliability of the study, and we can generalize the results into a larger population, because as we are doing on the samples, a subset of the population, but we are intended, because we are not only studying and applying to the same subset of the population or samples, finally that should be generalized to the larger population, right? So that can be done. And to improve the acceptability of the protocol, if inclusion and exclusion criteria are not properly framed, then the protocol won't be accepted in the review board or ethical boards. And at properly framed inclusion and exclusion criteria can attract the funding from the agencies if your study is well good and standard. And speedy peer reviews and accepted for the journals are also for paper publications. How to write these inclusion criteria? And inclusion criteria should be the variables that the researcher wants to study. Means if I want to study my research over hypertensive patients, I'm adding them. But here that you have to specify more that hypertensive patients of which category you're involving, either pre-hypertensives, hypertensives, type 1, type 2, a specific one. So we have to specify it. and it should be the characteristic of the representative of the population. Means later that you're taking a subset of population as samples that should represent the population, and it should be the objectively defined and measurable. Means once you frame the aims and objectives, those are defined properly, and if they are measurable even, it should facilitate the data collection. So because the inclusion criteria makes us to ease the data collection and align to our aims and objectives. And in aims and objective, you are saying the study is meant for type 2 hypertensive or type 2 diabetes, and the subjects you have collected is both type 1 and type 2, which is not aligned actually. And if you are a research team are together, so all members should accept or agree to it to go ahead for all the inclusion criteria. So the same thing we have seen. So is this fitting to the proper inclusion criteria? I feel so. You may add up more even to specify your topic. How to write an exclusion criteria? There should be the means who are going to exclude. It's not arbitrary. मुझे ये ऐड नहीं करना है, मुझे ये नहीं चाहिए, इसीलिए मैं एक्सक्लूड कर रहा हूँ. कोई पर्सनल ओपिनियंस नहीं चाहिए वहां पे. Once you are excluding means there should not be any personal things. Every criteria you're lying down there should have a proper rationale. So why you are excluding this factor? So the factors that should limit the safety of the research of the subjects, as I said, that the patients with retinopathy means it's not a safe for them. So should limit the safety of the researcher subjects. And if those criteria which are biasing the results and limiting the generalizability of the result, because if any confounders or modifying factors are there, we can't involve those kind of things. So we have to exclude. And those should be objective and measurable again. You have to define it properly, and that should align to the aims and objectives. That's what I am saying, that type 2 diabetes hai, so you should not be like excluding them. You have to align properly to the aims and objectives. Again, very important part that I have seen in many research articles also, and many research proposals where the protocols where because by unknowingly we are going to add the same variables what we have added in the inclusion criteria are going to be added in the exclusion criteria, or otherwise we should not add any kind of a negative statements of the inclusion criteria. Again, because we are taking a protocol, we are studying on the male subjects and adding females in the exclusion criteria. What to say about it? Is it going to be acceptable that if inclusion criteria added male and in exclusion criteria you're adding females? Please, anyone can respond so that I can understand that the participants are listening and we can have a good discussion here.
Actually, no need, sir, to
Yeah,
discuss here.
yeah, that's
because
good.
at one place you have mentioned.
Yes, so that there should be no negative comments or contradict or complement to inclusion criteria. Yeah, that's good that I can see the messages. Even anything you can respond like. So finally, that inclusion and exclusion criteria are not mutually exclusive. So that here is the one statement and same statement is going to be given in the exclusion criteria, which is a complement to each other. So another important question I just wanted to arise, that should the ability to consent be written in the inclusion and exclusion criteria?
No, sir.
Yeah.
It should
Where
not
it
be.
used to be, where it used to be. Yeah, somewhere I can see the answers. Yes, it should be included in this study.
Yeah,
And many of the answers saying no.
There is informed consent form, sir.
Yeah.
If some subject is willing to participate in the study, there is a procedure, informed consent form, ICF.
Yeah.
So
The question is that after making a well-written informed consent, is it required to be added the statement that the written well-informed written consent was taken from the subjects in any of these inclusion or exclusion criteria?
No, sir, I don't think it is necessary.
Oh, no, I think it should be taken.
Yeah. So I take both the points, yes and no, and we will discuss here. the thing is we have to add somewhere that informed consent was taken. If some articles, later they are going to question and they are going to send you back that please send those consent forms, because they arises a question, you haven't added anywhere about the consent form. As per the Helsinki Declaration, if you're doing the research on the subjects, you must have to involve or you add that written confirm consent form was taken from the subjects. Okay, but it doesn't require to be added anywhere in the inclusion or exclusion criteria. Over the methodology where the subjects you are defining them, on whom that you are taking are the things, there you can add a point. Because many of the research articles somewhere that okay, who haven't given voluntary written consent were excluded, or who are given the consent form were included. Always once that they fill the voluntary, it is a consent, means it's a voluntary participation, so that must be added because we are doing on the human subjects. Okay, so that should be in the methodology. That doesn't require always to be added in the inclusion or exclusion criteria separately. So I think we answered the both yes and no. It is yes, we have to add, but it doesn't to be added in the inclusion and exclusion criteria, because the question is about it should be added in these both the criteria, not at all required, because we are adding them in the methodology itself, that line. Because in that same methodology we have to add that institutional ethical committee approval was taken. At the same place we are going to add this line itself. Doesn't to be required to add in both the places. So are these exclusion criteria acceptable? Please have a look here. To assess the autonomic functions of the person with type 2 diabetes, asthma, smokers, alcoholics, yes, I think these are the exclusion criteria, and you may lie down much more to narrow the or proper specify the subjects even. Right? So what we have seen during the example are the same. So anyone if conflicting, you may add up. So how these exclusion criteria should be or inclusion criteria should be, as you might have seen that how you are framing the titles or the objectives, how that they should be very simple to understand and they must be measurable, whatever that you are taking the different variables, and those study that variables must be that affordable and relevant to our aims and objectives, and that should be testable, hypothetically testable. Yeah, I can see that those things can be added in this inclusion and exclusion criteria, so that they should be smart. Inclusion and exclusion criteria should be smart.
Excuse me, sir.
Yeah, please.
Smart criteria is also applicable for objective.
Yeah, very well. Even specifically to the title, some aspects are going to be for the title also, and we always prefer to be for the objectives also.
Okay, but sir, for title there is finance criteria, na?
Sorry,
For research topic there is finance criteria.
which criteria?
Finer.
Finance, yes, is there, because many other criteria were there, whichever that it's suitable. Finally, it should represent the study.
Okay, sir.
Yeah,
Sir, my point is that
there are many criteria were there. Out of it, only possible to us and what we can keep it, we are going to take it.
yes,
We can adopt.
Yes, sir. I have a query, sir.
Yeah, please.
Is there any limitation of words for inclusion and exclusion criteria?
No, until unless that if you're making an article, they're going to specify that these many words should be. Or some universities are going to lie down that you have to write the methodology within these many words. Then only you must have a limitation in the words. Otherwise, the protocol, how much you expand and how much you well write these, that is going to give you the best results for choosing the subjects.
Okay, sir.
That is why even ICMR, STS
guidance?
projects or any other funding agencies are going to ask, like, write a well-detailed methodology. Mainly for protocols, they ask the well-detailed methodology for it.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Yeah. And when should we write these inclusion and exclusion criteria? obviously once after preparing the protocol, you're not going to lie down. So at the time of protocol stage itself, you're going to make it clear that what these are the inclusion criteria, these are the subjects we are taking, these are the subjects that we can't take. So the time when we do the protocol itself, we're going to write these inclusion and exclusion criteria, and preferably should be pilot tested, because many times when we do the study, we don't know that, we think that these are all measurable, these can be testable, so we frame it all, but once we start doing it, we feel like a difficulty to do. So that rather doing before the protocol itself, a pilot study can be done on the few subjects, whatever we are thinking, is it feasible or not, possible to us or not, those can be tested, so that we can frame the inclusion and exclusion criteria, and then that can be pilot tested. So I'll give an example. So as I have given the type 2 diabetes patients, if I'm going to specify and narrow the type 2 diabetic patients by making the like an HbA1c levels of more than 9, if we wanted to study specifically, so is it feasible or not? Before knowing it, if you start making the protocol and protocol is accepted, then you have gone to your clinics or hospitals that where you're not getting the patients who are more than 9 HbA1c, means maybe that area have a no diabetes or diabetes is there, but they are well controlling, it will be very difficult to you. So you must have to go and study it pilotly, that okay, you will go to that and you will find it, is it we are getting the subjects or not first. So then research is not a journey with the Google Maps, once in between on the road it is showing that you have a diverse here, it will be very shortcut. So you have made means you have made, you can't change it later. So where changes are possible, some waivers might be there. It is depending upon the institutional review boards and institutional ethical committees, but they always put a lot of questions about the safety of the research participants. And obviously that you do this, you do this, you involve the controls, you involve these. So they try to increase the workload so that, the study outputs or results or outcomes will be very well. By that, sometimes a time delay may happens due to these um, possible by the review board or other authorities, which makes it. So otherwise, if those are not going to be there, which makes the scientific integrity questionable, you haven't narrowed it, you haven't framed properly the inclusion and exclusion criteria, so again that integrity is lost. So sometimes that if you haven't framed properly because of the confounders and modifiers, that's going to discourage the some funding agencies even. So what happens when the criteria are not properly chosen? Maybe that inclusion criteria, if you haven't set properly, a vague है कि आपने बोला है कि मैं diabetic patients को ले रहा हूँ, तो obviously sample size ज्यादा होगा, entire diabetic population है आपका, लेकिन आपने स्पेसिफिकली बोला है कि मैं टाइप 2 को ले रहा हूँ, वो भी HbA1c ज्यादा है, अनकंट्रोल्ड डायबिटीज को ले रहा हूँ ओनली, तो सैंपल साइज नैरो हो गया आपका, या आप वॉलेंटरी नहीं करने वाले हैं, previous studies की आप you're going to take the mean and standard deviations, and when you're going to calculate by making a criteria specifically, it's going to narrow down obviously. So exclusion criteria भी आप ज्यादा narrow रखा, sample size ज्यादा हो गया, exclusion में मैं खाली type 1 को हटा रहा हूँ, type 2 पूरा लेना पड़ेगा. अब exclusion criteria को ज्यादा too vague रखा कि बहुत सारे रख दिया आपने, उसमें भी मैंने HbA1c less than 9 को लेना नहीं है, तो ऑब्वियसली सैंपल साइज कम हो जाएगा. उसी हिसाब से वही आर्टिकल्स को आप चूज करना पड़ेगा, हु आर हैविंग मोर देन 9 को लिया है, उसी हिसाब से आपको सैंपल साइज भी कैलकुलेट करना होगा. So finally, according to your study, what exactly you wanted to have, you have to make an appropriate criteria, so that out of it the sample size is going to come out specifically, so that is intended to the whole population. So have some justification for each criteria. Again, I am stressing this point. So every criteria you're lying down here in the exclusion criteria or inclusion criteria, that should have a proper reason. It is not our personal thing, like तो ये मुझे नहीं मिलता है तो मैं उसे मैं हटाऊंगा, या मैं प्रोटोकॉल में तो ऐड कर दिया, बाद में मुझे पेशेंस नहीं मिल रहा था तो मैं ले लिया. It should not be. You have to justify it later. To the, even while making a protocol, you have to justify it to the committees, and while after the thesis also you have to justify it to the group of people that who are going to be with a final viva. How to select just appropriate criteria? Shall we exclude a person? Means out of these points, just check. Shall we exclude a person with a heart rate of 50 per minute from the study? Shall we take the individual aged 50 years and reject the 70 years old? Subjects who have active medical or psychiatric condition, which in the opinion of a investigating team would compromise the ability to participate in this study. So can we involve the pregnancy, women with pregnancy? What are you going to do? How are you going to answer for this? Always a trade-off between the affordable sensitivity and specificity. So how are we going to rule out? If you are involving the people are just, I wanted to study the population of a diabetes and their heart rate. We're going to check. But if any person whose heart rate is a 50 per minute, if they are athletes, we're going to exclude, because obviously the athletes have a less heart rate. But the thing is here, to whom that you are studying, you have to specify it. There is no certain criteria that you're going to exclude these people, you're going to include those people. So this should be specified in your protocol, and as per the protocol you have to take. It doesn't mean कि मुझे ये study करना है, बस मैं मुझे इस age group में ही ज़्यादा मिलेंगे इसीलिए मैं इसी age group को ले लूँ. What is the rationale for it? That rationale should be searched and justified from the previous research. Or otherwise, you are specifying that this study I wanted to check in this age group only. Then only which is going to be justified. Again, so again you have to justify why only I am taking this age group. Specifically, is there any pathophysiology which is there specifically for the age group suggesting? Are the articles or previous researches were not done in this specific age group or in this specific population? You have to justify it. So if you are studying eclampsia or preeclampsia, obviously that you have to involve the pregnancy. If I am doing a research which showing that the autonomic function test we are testing on the diabetic population, I'm not going to consider the pregnancy, because I have to exclude the population or women with a pregnancy, so that they should have a trademark, trade-off, like to whom exactly you are studying it, so that your inclusion and exclusion criteria should be laid off. Like simply to say, the inclusion criteria are picking fruits and vegetables from the farm actually, okay, and exclusion criteria is separating out the vegetables from it, okay, or fruits from it, specifically anything, okay. So here the example is showing that fruits are collected and the vegetables are separating it, not exactly. So if your group, if you have taken that, separate those things by properly framing the inclusion and exclusion criteria. How to apply these criteria? आपने आपकी प्रोटोकॉल में क्या बनाते हैं? पहले इंक्लूजन क्राइटेरिया को पहले बनाते हैं, एक्सक्लूजन क्राइटेरिया को यूजुअली पहले इंक्लूजन क्राइटेरिया बनाते हैं, बाद में एक्सक्लूजन क्राइटेरिया, but always before randomization it should be. So my question is that any problem if the sequence is altered? Yes, obviously that. Can anyone say that if it is altered, what happens? Please, anyone wanted to say?
Yes, sir.
Yeah,
We can
please.
exclude after writing inclusion, sir.
Yeah,
This is not
always it
possible
is.
to write
So
exclusion first.
we can't say alter the sequence.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, we have to ensure that the results are going to be accurate once we frame properly that whom we want to involve.
Yes.
अगर आप ऐसा ऐसा होगा कि एक एग्जांपल मैं बताना चाहता हूँ कि जस्ट मार्केट गया आपने आलू लेने,
Yes,
आपने
sir.
तो पहले तो इन्वॉल्व करेंगे कि मुझे आई हैव टू टेक द पोटैटोस, बट यू आर नॉट गोइंग टू मेक एन एक्सक्लूजन क्राइटेरिया कि मैं पहले टमाटर नहीं लेना है, मुझे ऑनियंस नहीं लेना है, मुझे ये नहीं लेना, वो नहीं लेना, ये नहीं बना सकते आप. You have to
Definitely, sir.
specify the inclusion criteria, what exactly you wanted to take. Then later you are going to involve, मुझे ये specific इस size का लेना है, इतना weight का लेना है. Those can be the inclusion criteria. Then उसमें exclusion criteria क्या रहेगा? हाँ, potatoes में कुछ खराब है, वो मैं नहीं लेना चाहता हूँ. ठीक है? So what can be the criteria? Which are wet, वो नहीं लेना चाहता हूँ मैं, क्योंकि जल्दी खराब हो जाएंगे. So this might be understanding that कि properly we have to inclusion criteria, we have to make it first. Then we go for exclusion. So what are the steps for determining the effective criteria? कैसा हम इसको बनाना होता है कि effectively कुछ भी हम डाल सकते हैं? We can keep anything, whatever we can. Always you have to go through proper literature before you're going to make any kind of a inclusion or exclusion criteria. You have to carefully look through it, okay, and refer valid resources for these medical conditions that where we are going to exclude or include. You can have a lot, many might be that if you properly go through the literature. Sometimes you may choose the same when your study is the same, but always you have to consider the arms of your study. कि same आप aims and objectives carry हो रहा है. If any change in your aims and objective of your study, you can't keep the same inclusion and exclusion criteria that you have searched from the literature. You always search them, but based on your arms, means based on your objectives, you have to make it. So always brainstorm. So sit with your guide, sit with your co-guide, with a peers, yourself and your batchmates. Always you have to discuss. Then only the many things are going to come out. And look at the past protocols or the theses which are made at your departments. Justify the reasoning behind each criteria, as we already discussed. At times I said that you can take it from the review of literature, means the previous articles, but simply copy paste won't be effective, because many other things are there. Because every part that you are adding should provide a proper reason for it. And once if it is asked by your review boards or your guys, you must have to show the resources also where you have taken, and keep your objectives always in consideration. Then only the proper effective criteria can be determined. How to adhere to this criteria? पहले तो हमने बना दिया criteria, तो inclusion criteria भी बना दिया, exclusion criteria भी बना दिया, लेकिन वही inclusion criteria और exclusion criteria के साथ ही हम sampling ले रहे हैं. कैसा हो सकता है? If you are doing it individually, that's fine. We always know, and every time we are going to check that retrospectively कि हमने क्या बनाया गया है, इस patients को हम ले सकते हैं, नहीं ले सकते हैं. Because many things practically when we start doing the sampling तभी समझ में आता है. लेकिन बहुत स्टडीज ऐसा होते हैं मल्टी सेंट्रिक हो सकता है, या वो स्टडीज ग्राउंड स्टाफ से करवाना होता है. सो तो स्टाफ को क्विज लगा सकते हैं कि अच्छा इस कंडीशन के साथ अगर पेशेंट आया तो हम उस पेशेंट को या केसेस को हम इन्वॉल्व कर सकते हैं, नहीं है. एंड ऑलवेज वी हैव टू गिव ए कॉपी ऑफ द क्राइटेरिया व्हेन स्क्रीनिंग. बिकॉज स्क्रीनिंग अगर हम एक पेशेंट्स की ओपीडीज में या वहाँ की जो ओपीडी में बैठते हैं, जो फ्रंट ऑफिस एग्जीक्यूटिव से हम बना रहे हैं, प्रॉपर्ली ट्रेन करना है. एंड इंक्लूड इंक्लूजन एंड एक्सक्लूजन क्राइटेरिया ऑन द स्क्रीनिंग स्क्रिप्ट्स में ऐड कर सकते हैं, so that a direct questions to the private investigators किसी को दे रहे हैं आप, then you have to direct question them that we are to whom making, and progress meetings में ये discuss करना है कि क्या हो रहा है. So by that we can adhere to the criteria that what we have made. Why criteria differ in various studies? हम बोल सकते हैं कि इस स्टडी में तो वो इन्वॉल्व किया है, हमारा स्टडी में हम इन्वॉल्व कर सकते हैं क्या? अच्छा नहीं करते तो क्यों नहीं इन्वॉल्व करना चाहिए? सो माइट हैव अ कल्चरल, एथनिक एंड रिलीजियस पॉलिटिकल पॉलिसी डिफरेंसेस रहेगा हर कंट्री में. सो वो भी हम कंसिडरेबल पॉइंट्स में लेना चाहिए. और अगर क्लिनिकल ट्रायल्स में है या प्रीवियस लिटरेचर में है, सो वी हैव टू गो थ्रू इट प्रॉपरली बिफोर एडिंग द प्रॉपर क्राइटेरिया. इसीलिए कि स्टडीज में अलग अलग हो सकता है. कि यहाँ पे फर्स्ट पॉइंट आप देख सकते हैं कि फर्स्ट क्वेश्चन, शुड वी टेक एथनिसिटी इनटू द कंसिडरेशन व्हाइल प्लानिंग trials for antihypertensives? Yes, because if you go through the studies, there are many studies which showing the effectiveness or sensitivity of the salt, and then the drugs effectiveness for the ethnic population, African, Caucasians. You have a differences, we may. So again the questions which becomes that should we include the children or elderly in the phase 2 trials and phase 4 trials? Again, it's a matter. Go to the literature. Go to the studies that what it is showing that phases means which drugs you are involving. The vaccines you are testing on the infants or means the children. You have to add, because these comes and as a vulnerable population. You have to check the safety of them even. Along with that, to whom it is actually intended. Because the intended population के ऊपर अगर check नहीं किया, how are you going to prove that this drug is going to be effective, or this drug is effective than the other drug? So what are the side effects of the drugs? What are the long-term effects of these drugs? Those are going to be studied. Then only we can come to the conclusion, okay, the effectiveness of this drug. So that you have to always considerable safety factors and other aspects before doing the criteria to lie down. That is the reason where different countries and different studies which were showing having a differences in the criteria which lie down. So how to word inclusion and exclusion criteria? Write in a clear and ambiguous language, means it should be very clear, legible. Avoid the same variable to define both inclusion and exclusion criteria. Same avoid कीजिए. Selecting variables as inclusion criteria that are related to the research question. हमारा research question क्या है, उसी हिसाब से हमारा inclusion criteria होना चाहिए. Describing the key variables in inclusion criteria that are need to be specified, means उस criteria को explicitly, detailedly हम mention करने की जरूरत पड़ता है. टाइप 2 ले रहा हूं तो वो टाइप 2 के अंदर क्या है, properly specified, and mention the durations and acceptable ranges of the parameters correctly. अगर मुझे क्योंकि different associations ने different values देते हैं, International Diabetic Federation, Indian Diabetic Federation, maybe the other associations or hypertensive associations are going to lie down. So which one you are following? Is it you are following a WHO criteria and you are following that criteria of the Asian population? Is it that is fitting to the Indian population? And if you are taking a BMI, so properly every aspect of the acceptable ranges and their resources that from where you have taken, that should be properly specified, so that you won't be getting much more troubles to it. So we are coming to the almost end, that showing some examples to you that to satisfy the inclusion and exclusion criteria. So you can see the example one, satisfaction with the hospital services. An example of inclusion criteria for a study of patients about a satisfaction in the hospital services. Inclusion criteria check कर लीजिए. Attending the hospital for the first time. जो patients hospital में पहले बार attend कर रहे हैं, कोई भी जेंडर हो, सारे जो कोई भी फैसिलिटी में विजिट किया, उन लोगों के ऊपर आप सेटिस्फैक्टरी सर्वे आप ले रहे हैं. इसमें एक्सक्लूजन क्राइटेरिया में डाला है कि विजिटिंग हॉस्पिटल फॉर सेकंड टाइम एंड थर्ड टाइम आर एक्सक्लूडेड. Please discuss. Means the patients के inclusion criteria में already that we have added attending hospital for the first time. Is it adding visiting hospital for second time and later more times? Is it required to add it in the exclusion criteria?
No, sir.
Yeah, that's fine. So that finally at the end of the thing we have to understand that the same things वहां पे yes लिख के यहाँ पे no लिखना, वो चीज जरूरत ही नहीं है. We have to specify them. Again, in the second example, if I am studying the cognitive function in type 2 diabetes patients, okay, so I am checking the cognitive function in the type 2 diabetes patients. So inclusion criteria is we have already diagnosed type 2 patients of any gender between the age group of 35 to 59 years I am taking. So exclusion criteria में मैं diabetes type 1 को हटा रहा हूँ, hypertension को हटा रहा हूँ, age less than 35 and more than 59 years I'm excluding them. So please discuss this about.
It
So
is
now-
not necessary, sir, to write age less than 35 because it is already mentioned in inclusion criteria. Age should be in between 35 and 59.
Okay, good. So again, type 2 diabetes involved कर रहा है. What about the type 1? And what about the hypertension?
Only
Okay, sir.
hypertension should be included, I think.
Yeah, at times, because hypertension at times, who are having type 2 diabetes may certain points have a hypertension even. Both are going to add up to the cognitive, because it is a confounder which is going to be affecting, associating with the both exposure as well as the outcome. We have to exclude properly.
Yes, sir.
And then the obesity and food intake among children. Children with a BMI of more than 30 we are including. What are the exclusion criteria? Other medical conditions interfering with the food intake, and parents not able to keep the record of food intake. What about this example? Yeah, seems
Exclusion
right.
is right, sir.
Yeah, please.
Exclusion criteria is correct, sir.
Yeah.
It is
So it
necessarily
is
required.
fitting it properly, right? You
Yes,
may
sir.
specify it in the inclusion criteria the children of which age you are taking. That's fine, that you can add it more, but it seems to be fitting it.
Yes, sir.
Means unnecessary add-ups nahi hai isme. So we come to the end of the topic of a small but a detailed discussion, I hope. So how it is inclusion criteria and exclusion criteria to be? So it is a essential part of the research protocol and manuscripts before we are going ahead. And they should always align with the aims and objectives, should be specific, measurable, affordable, relevant, and testable, and should guide the researcher in a proper selection of the subjects. And they are going to adhere, means once the criteria is made, should be adhered to the throughout the study. इसीलिए कि कभी आपको बाद में दिक्कत ना हो जाए, कभी आप बनाने से पहले एक पायलट स्टडी भी करके तब जा सकते हैं. And specific criteria banane se always it saves us from the biases and institutional review board queries also, and helps in generalizing the results finally that to whom we are intending the study which actually was taken. So my side I'm done. Please if any questions and any discussions, please we will continue.
Thank you, sir. Is there any query you may still ask?
Good evening, sir.
Please, good evening.
Sir, I have a question which is not relatable to the inclusion and exclusion criteria of clinical study, but it otherwise is an important point while we are writing. So, any meta-analysis or a systematic review, even then we have an inclusion and exclusion criteria. So, do we really have any fixed number when we are selecting the number of studies to be included for systematic review or meta-analysis?
No,
For
I don't think
example,
so, because if you are checking a particular group of population or the samples, if those were studies were not done, if suppose I am doing an advanced course in medical education right now, I have chosen that gamification in the medical education, means game based education. If I am going to see that entire articles which are related to the topic were very limited, nobody can say that this should be the number for the meta analysis.
okay, sir.
Based on the topic, it's going to depend. Again, if you're going to make a proper inclusion and exclusion criteria, so okay, मुझे इस gamification में या game based medical education में मुझे digital games नहीं चाहिए, physical games जो है उसी को involve करना है, वो पूरा फिर inclusion और exclusion criteria अलग अलग हो रहा है, तो फिर number of studies और कम होते जा रहा है आपका. It doesn't mean that there is no specific number of it anywhere in the meta analysis to take only these.
Right, sir. Thank you so much.
Yeah, welcome.
Hello, sir. I have a query. In Ayurveda, usually there are Panchakarma procedures. So, in a study where certain Panchakarma procedures are being applied to a diseased population, and these Panchakarma procedures have their own exclusion criteria. That is, they are not to be done in certain population. So, while writing in the inclusion criteria, it is usually written that those who are willing to undertake or those who are under Shastra, which is mentioned, those who are able to take these procedures will be included under the inclusion criteria. My query is that whether in exclusion criteria can we include the disease specific exclusions, and along with that can we include those people where these panchakarma procedures are being excluded?
Yeah, another same point that we have seen. So you have 2 points. Every procedure have an individual exclusion criteria. One aspect. Another aspect to whom we are involving, which they are unable to do. If one thing is you are involved, means included in the inclusion criteria, so the same is doesn't require to be added in the exclusion criteria. But different procedures, whatever you have taken, that exclusion criteria should be laid down properly. Same point, what you have added in the inclusion criteria doesn't require to be added in the exclusion criteria separately.
Okay, thank you, sir.
So I hope there is a one query in chat box, sir, from Dr. Ruchi. What kind of protocol deviations are allowed after approval?
And those protocol deviations are based on institutional review board and the institutional ethical committee. Because certain times if you are doing waivers, means going beyond it, then you must have to change from the protocol and you have to take the institutional ethical committee approval by changing it. You can certain times, because certain procedures when you have chosen may be there, but later that you can't do it. Then at that point you have to apply it to the institutional ethical committee. This procedure of this study can't be further valid, or otherwise banned, or otherwise which is not available in the area, so that please approve it by considering the safety factors, changing this kind of procedures. Then the institutional ethical committee will change it, and again they'll issue the a fresh certificate of it.
I hope Dr. Ruchi, you get your answer. And thank you very much, sir, for delivering a knowledgeable session. And on the behalf of organizer, extend my sincere gratitude for gracing us with your insightful session and expertise in this online program of 1 month certificate program. I hope and thank you to all delegates who are interacting during the session, Dr. Vipin, Dr. Suresh, and all delegates. And I request to all this try to interact in all sessions to clarify your doubts. So thank you again, sir, for your valuable time and expertise sharing with all delegates in this program.
Thank you very much, and thank you for all for giving me the opportunity. Thanks all the participants that who involved in active discussion. Thank you so much.
So this is the end of today's session, and tomorrow we will again start the next session, components of result writing, that will be delivered by Dr. Hitesh Kurana, sir, from PGIMS Rohtak, Haryana. So be on time. The session will start tomorrow at 7:30. The components of result writing. Till then, thank